Yes, I can. So we published 20,000 boosting emails from the DNC, from Debbie Wasserman Schultz, from the Communications Director, Ms. Miranda, from the Chief Financial Officer, and so on. And also communications to others and to the Hillary Clinton campaign and a number of other groups. What they show is not only was there a sort of internal view or discussions about how to undermine Bernie Sanders and support Hillary Clinton, not surprising given that Debbie Wasserman Schultz used to work for Hillary Clinton's campaign, but rather there were formal instructions made to DNC staff to execute a campaign of black propaganda against Bernie Sanders. What do I mean by that? For example, Louis Miranda, the communications chief, instructed his staff to put out in a, quote, unattributable manner allegations that Bernie Sanders supporters were engaged in acts of violence. Similarly, there was discussions to expose or rather claim that Bernie Sanders was an atheist and that this would harm him in the South, to use his religious beliefs, or rather his lack of religious beliefs, against him. Yeah, so then there's aspects to do with how financing was being bounced around between the DNC and the state parties and the Hillary Clinton Victory Fund. To my mind, I think the most ongoing interesting material, which has been picked up now by a wide range of state-based investigative journalists in the US, is the influence peddling structure of the DNC. Who goes to what private conventions at particular people's houses with Barack Obama or with the Vice President, Joseph Biden, and the sort of some of the things that they get into get in exchange, for example, being put on federal government boards and commissions.
Ridiculous on the part of the Sanders campaign.
Well, sure. That's the third big revelation that comes out, which is, I didn't mention it because as someone who's having to deal with the media all the time, I understand how real this is. But the general public, it is proof of something important, which is the direct connections between the Hillary Clinton faction in the DNC and the president of MSNBC. For example, Debbie Wasserman Schultz called up the president of NBC in order to haul Morning Joe into line because they were speaking about the bias of the DNC. Talking points were constructed for Jake Tapper, for example, on CNN. Of course, we don't know whether he was willing to use them. He has denied that, but at least from the DNC end, they constructed the questions that he was to ask them, even saying, watching coverage live and calling up the networks to say, no, put a stop to that chain of communication right now. Well, I'm afraid it's much worse than that. The Obama administration has gone after more whistleblowers using the Espionage Act not only than all previous presidents combined back to 1917, when the act was first passed in World War I to deal with World War I spies, but in fact now 3 times as many. So this is really an epidemic to abuse the national security law in order to stop whistleblowers and journalists and publishers. So the attempted prosecution, the pending prosecution of WikiLeaks in the United States, use the Espionage Act, uses Computer Terrorism Act, et cetera, et cetera. But the same act, the 1917 Espionage Act, was used to go after and obtain subpoenas in relation to Fox News reporter reporting on information allegedly obtained from the State Department. Similarly, going after Associated Press's telephone call records. So it's there's a galloping epidemic of abuse of national security law under this Democratic administration, which Hillary Clinton was part of. She and Obama were involved in placing one of my alleged sources, Chelsea Manning, into prison for 35 years, only for communicating truthful information to the public. There's no other allegation. No allegation about working with spies or anything like that. Just communicating truthful information to the press and to the public. That situation's so bad that Chelsea Manning was tortured in prison. It's a formal finding of the UN, even a finding by the US military justice system that illegal punishments occurred during prison. And just a week and a half ago, unfortunately, she attempted suicide because of the difficulty in the conditions. Well, I just want to correct very quickly some false reporting. Very interestingly, when we published the DNC leaks, the New York Times, which has picked its favorite candidate, as has Bloomberg, which is Hillary Clinton, said that I intended to harm Hillary Clinton. This is what we've been doing for 10 years. It was a completely fabricated story by Charlie Savage. Okay, but yes, we are very interested in power and publishing the truth about power so people can work out, however they choose, to reform power. And so Google is a kind of new power on the block, so we're interested in it, and we're also interested in Hillary Clinton when she was Secretary of State and now running for presidential candidacy. So these two powers have merged at a kind of personal level, and political level, and even to a small extent at the organizational level. So that book written 3 years ago has been proved to be very prescient. The chairman of Google, who was the CEO of Google, Eric Schmidt, has started about a year ago a company to run Hillary Clinton's digital campaign. Google has attended the White House on average over the last 4 years, once per week, more than any other single company. It spends more money lobbying Washington, D.C. than any other single company. Hillary Clinton's former staffer, Jared Cohen, was hired by Google in 2009 to head up Google's internal think tank. There's a lot of other interconnections between Google and the state. Eric Schmidt is now also, at the same time as being chairman of what is now Google's parent company, Alphabet, is chairman of the Pentagon Innovation Board. So you have a connection between Google, the Clinton campaign, which will be almost certainly the next White House, and the Pentagon. And this triangle is extremely worrying. because as time goes by, Google is understanding that it does have an ability to influence election campaigns. It's also bought more than 10 drone companies. It's integrating its mapping data in order to better be able to fly and navigate drones around the world, as expanding into every country in the world. And it has a very strange quasi-religious vision of the future, this vision of the singularity. It's really, go and research that. It's very disturbing what they believe in Silicon Valley, but they believe they can create a massive artificial intelligence more powerful than any human being or any society's ability to think. And of course, we all know what happens when such power is in limited hands. And so Google in the White House will be essentially an unregulatable company. It's a question whether it's already unregulatable, but you can just completely forget about any kind of antitrust legislation being used on Google if there is a Hillary Clinton White House. Well, it could be both. It could be both. Uh, uh, no, it is possibly the most serious issue. The potential threat of nuclear war, I think, is perhaps the other one. Yes, there is a merger going on at a rapid pace between the largest American corporations and the traditional aspects of the US state, the military intelligence aspects. I mean, that's been there for a long time, frankly, with Northrop Grumman, General Dynamics, General Electric, etc. But this is a new generation, and Eric Schmidt wrote in his book about Google and the world that what Lockheed Martin and other aerospace companies were to the 20th century, high-tech companies will be to the 21st century. And that's very much their vision, to integrate with Washington to prevent antitrust regulation and to be part of that family of traditional DC mediated power. That's a very interesting question. Does it make any difference who is president or not? A very, very interesting question. It certainly doesn't make as much difference as people say. What really makes a difference is what the environment is in which the president has to work. And that is the environment of critique, on the one hand, so how free the media is, how much opposition organizations are doing their job in holding government to account. And it's the economic and corporate environment, and then to a degree the international foreign affairs environment. And the president is much more a spokesperson for these forces around them. Where they do make a big difference is in their initial appointments. So the people that they choose to fill those slots in government that then reactively makes policy. But as you can see with Barack Obama, most of the time is spent reading out teleprompters. There's just not enough time to do much else and be a spokesperson for these groups. So what is happening now with the Green Party and Gary Johnson uh, um, and the Bernie Sanders campaign and so on is very, very important, but it must be seen past the moment, past this political moment. That's a moment to build a movement and build pressure. And having built it, then one can discipline and hold to account and check the abuses of government during the next 4 years. I think it is. I mean, it is a remarkable moment in U.S. politics. For the Greens, it's. I mean, uh, the Greens, if they pursue this campaign, as they do seem to be doing so, can, and I believe probably will, produce a very solid bloc after. And I think that's really heartening. It's a horrific vision. I mean, who's going to be next US president is a horrific vision. I was asked this question: did I prefer Clinton or Trump? And I mean, the answer is, well, you're asking, do I prefer cholera or gonorrhea? The, I mean, it's a very sad situation, but I think, given the reality has always been that the presidency pretty quickly merges with the bureaucracy that it's around it, because the bureaucracy is enormous and the corporate lobbyists are enormous compared to the political parties. Um, it actually, it could be a net positive to have a president, either in the form of Hillary or Trump, probably, who knows? You never know what happens in a campaign. Maybe Jill Stein will be president. Maybe Gary Johnson will be president. No, I'm serious. You never know. Like, who knows what happens during a campaign? Anything's possible. And you have to be ready for that. But if it is Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump, then that's a very adverse environment. But the nature of those, I like things to look like what they are. I think Hillary Clinton, in her statements, demeanor, and associations and track record, looks like the power that she actually does represent. Similarly, with Donald Trump, maybe with Donald Trump, he even looks more like what the power he'll end up representing than he does actually represent it. But that's a situation that generates resistance and accountability, and that is what really checks the behavior of government over time. It is the various pressures that exist on the presidency. That's what checks their behavior. So these are two characters that are the most unpopular pair of presidential candidates in US history. And going into the presidency, they are going to continue to generate oversight and resistance, which will not only create a fertile field for Gary Johnson and Jill Stein to grow their support, but will create a very fertile field to understand and hold government to account. That's right, and that's right, and a few whistleblowers. I mean, I'm here in the United. Well, I'm here in Ecuador, in the United Kingdom, with a pending US prosecution. It's very strange. I've become quite a multi-jurisdictional creature. But the Corbyn phenomenon in the UK really does show that something important and very important is happening. There is a political moment in the English-speaking world that the Greens should, and it looks like are, seizing upon. It's a very important moment. Hmm. All right, great question. Uh, well, first of all, have coherency in your own movement. I mean, you have to have coherency to be able to understand um, your own view of the world and the attacks that are occurring, which let me tell you that I've just seen that the attacks have started to ramp up on Jill Stein. Uh, they, they are going to go through the roof. Uh, I've had attacks from what is effectively the Clinton dirt machine. Uh, they they're now post convention. You guys are going to be post convention. Those attacks are going to be ferocious, but you'll see from that and learn lessons from that about how the media works and how one can defend your principles and ideas in the face of that kind of media corruption. So, um, to defend civil liberties and the internet, the first thing is to practice it. That's the number one thing. Uh, that's what we do. We defend the First Amendment and similar constitutional amendments in other states by practicing them. We've won every single court case that we have been involved in over the last 10 years. Um, and that any right that is not fought for through practice and defense is very, very quickly lost. It is just a piece of paper unless you actually fight for it and practice for it. Then there's a range of technical measures and some good people, researchers trying to push out those technical measures. Um, WikiLeaks tweets about that. Edward Snowden tweets about what some of those technical measures are. I support those people who are engaged in trying to engineer, in a practical sense, how to protect people's privacy. And the other is to support various groups that are doing it and to build the ideological understanding that it is an important thing. Because let's go back and look at Google. Google is very different in an important way from Lockheed Martin. Yes, Google is building drones. Yes, Lockheed Martin was and is building F-16s. But Google also controls how we communicate with each other. So Google is, in a sense, like HIV. It doesn't, it's not just something that afflicts your arm. It afflicts your ability to understand and fight the infection. That's true of all um, media, libraries, communication services, etc. They're involved in um, that part of society that we use to understand ourselves, and that is the freedom of communication. So the freedom of communication, in some sense, is the fundamental right because it is the enabling right that allows us to speak to each other to understand the importance of all our other rights. And so when the freedom of communication is degraded or maligned, when whistleblowers are prosecuted, when one organization starts to develop a monopoly on the internet and interfere with our communication, then all our rights suffer because this fundamental enabling right is degraded. So fight for it or lose it. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. As the editor of WikiLeaks, I have gone through a lot of battles. I have seen corrupt mainstream media outlets try to not report initially on some of our materials, spin them in other directions. That's happened just recently. And I have also seen good journalists embedded in those institutions fighting to be accurate and truthful. There are good people, even in bad institutions. Most of our sources are good people wanting to do good things within the US military or the intelligence or political parties. So my strong advice is to understand, first of all, the necessity to be very skeptical of the traditional media apparatus, which is ultimately owned by some of the largest industrial conglomerates in the world, strongly connected to other points of power. Work around it, become your own media in practice, in small ways, in big ways, to keep um, your principles and sense of clarity on principles. What the Clinton campaign is doing at the moment is trying to say, well, okay, yes, maybe we're connected to arms dealers and to Saudi Arabia, and yes, maybe we subverted the integrity of the Democratic primaries, et cetera, but you'll just have to swallow that. You'll just have to swallow that, or else you'll get Donald Trump. That's a form of extortion, and you, it is a form of extortion, and you can't permit. It's very important not to allow the political process to suffer from extortion, or even yourself to be susceptible to extortion. That one says one has certain principles. If these principles are not followed, then there is a price to be paid, and that creates a standard and a general deterrent. And I think it is important for those people who feel that their principles have been violated in the way that the democratic primary process has been run, or how Chelsea Manning has been imprisoned for 35 years and tortured, or the Espionage Act crackdowns, or many other things, to go, okay, well, there's a cost to violating principles, even if there's also a cost to yourself, even if you don't like the risk, which seems to be getting very small, but the risk that Donald Trump becomes president, that one has to have a lion somewhere. Otherwise, as each election cycle proceeds, you are pushed further and further into the corner. Right. Thank you. Thank you, guys. That's very flattering. Thanks. And, yeah. Thanks, guys. Bye bye.